Our guest this week on Veterans Chronicles is Charles Temple Jr.
That's correct.
He is a U.S. Navy veteran of World War II.
That's correct.
And sir, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for giving me that nice conversation.
Where were you born and raised, sir?
I was born and raised in southern Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. And I was raised there, right in that area.
And what was your childhood like?
Pardon?
What was your childhood like?
Well, no, that's an interesting thing because I wanted to tell you that I'm a product of a young man in a Great Depression. And my childhood was like most people then, it was pretty tough going. But I'll go on to tell you this, that I'm a product of family of blacksmiths. And we did have a trade to work by. And my father, I helped my father as young as 12 years old. I was helping him in shoeing horses and fixing farm machinery and going out to the farms and repairing pumps. At night, there were old Model Ts and Model As were then, you know, and we would grind the valves in these cars at night to make $1. And that's how I started out as a young man with my father. And I learned the trades, many trades, mechanics and other things at a very early age. And I was very fortunate to have that happen to me for later on in life.
Did you have a history of military service in your family?
No. There were my father, uncles, there were none of them in the service.
So when did you join, or were you drafted?
No, I joined. Now here's what happened. You know, back then, we used to go to the movies on Saturday nights, and you remember the name Ernie Pyle? Ernie Pyle was always sending all this information back with pictures and films, and he was a great reporter. And as young men then, we were just in school, you know, we just got to thinking, boy, we've got to be doing something. We've got to be getting in that service and trying to help, you know. And so that's what really got me motivated to start thinking about joining the service.
So tell us about how you enlisted.
Okay, first of all, I'll have to digress for just a little bit. Because I was so well trained as a young man, and the war effort was on, and the factories didn't have much help, and you could get a job anywhere. So I went to Sunship Building and Dry Dock Company in Chester, Pennsylvania, and signed up there and was a welder, because I had learned that already in 1938. And so I was working on the ships out down on the inner bottoms because I was small and skinny. I could get in those tight places. And I was working there for a while, and one day I got a kick on the leg, and the man came in and he said, Charles, you lied. He said, you're not old enough to work here. I said, yeah, I know that. Well, he said, we got to furlough you out of here. So I picked up all my gear and went up and walked up to the office and with the wind in. We were getting furloughed out, and there was a man standing there. And he walked over and right to the man, and he said, hey. He said, I saw that boy working out on the way. I call that a way where they're building these ships, you know. And he said, I know what he can do. And he's old enough to work at the training center up here in the North Yard up there near Essington at Crum Creek. They had a great big Quonset hut where they trained welders. And they said, good, we didn't need help up there. So I didn't get kicked out. So I went up there, and I was clamping up steel and cleaning and sweeping the floors and doing all that kind of stuff, you know. And so what happens after 2 or 3 weeks? One of the instructors did not show up for work. And the boss came over to me and he said, Charles, he said, God, look at this. I have 4 or 5 men standing out there. What am I going to do with them? He said, do you think you can help me out? I said, sure. So I was in, and you know, I've been working. I learned this as 12, 14 years old. I went out there and was showing them how to weld and doing all that kind of stuff, overhead, vertical, and all that kind of stuff. And of course, they never could report it like they should have, but in a couple of weeks I was an instructor, you see. and working there, and supposed to be a cleanup boy. So that was okay. I kept working there, but right near where I was working, there was a railroad track. And it was the Red Arrow, I think it was, that went into Philadelphia. And I've been thinking about this, going into the service thing, you see. So one day I knocked off a little early and walked over and got on a trolley and went into South Philadelphia and walked the whole way up Broad Street to the Enlistment Center in Philadelphia. Now here I was. Oh, by the way, I had already lied about my age. I wasn't 18, I was 17. I think I was just almost 17. Okay, but they didn't care because they needed help, you see. So I went up there, and well, they wouldn't really sign me up. They got my name, and I was on the books. So they said, well, you need maybe. Oh, I was going back to school too. Right. It was in the fall. I was going to go back to school. So I went back to school, and the Navy. I went into the Navy. I tried to join the Navy, and here the Navy is calling the school every week, a couple times a week. The school didn't want to release me, see, because I was in school and I needed to stay in school, of course, as far as they were concerned. So this went on for a couple months, and so finally the Navy told the enlistment center up there, listen, if you release Charles, we'll give him all the books that he needs to finish. I had 2 math classes I needed to finish. Well, the school, they were kind of dragging their feet, and after a while they finally said, yes. Well, bango, I'm in the Navy right then. So I go up there when they notified me. I went up there and a certain day, and they started shipping us out to different places, and I went up to the Finger Lakes for my basic training in New York. Yeah, I went up there for my basic training, and then when I was finished there, I was sent over to Newport, Rhode Island, and the war was at its peak. It was just in both sides of the ocean.
What year is it right now?
This is in 45.
Okay.
Well, I started in 44, but this was the early 45.
Gotcha.
Yeah, really early. I mean, like January, February 45. And so I got my basic training. I went over there to Newport, and it was getting into February or March then, you see. And so one day they came into barracks and said, so I think it was 26 of us, said, 800, tomorrow morning be out there with your sea bags. You're going to the Pacific. We're going to fly you out to the Pacific. Okay, that was fine. We're getting all ready. In 2 days we were going to go. The next day it came on the radio that it looked like the war was winding down in Europe. Everything got frozen. So I didn't go anywhere. We just stayed right there. And then we were there. I was there for a month or two. And then same old thing, 800 tomorrow morning. I think it was 12 or 16 men. Be out front, you're going to go down to the Navy Yards in Philadelphia. Okay? Okay. Now don't forget, I worked out on the ways at Sun Shipbuilding and Dry Dock Company in Chester. Okay? So we go down to the Navy Yards, and they have rooms out on the dock there where people, and we lived there in those rooms, you see, for a while. And I guess we were down there for maybe 2 weeks or something like that. And well, tomorrow morning, 800, be out front. There's going to be a bus here. Now listen, here is an amazing thing. I had worked at the shipyards. 800. We got on this bus, and where did we go? To Sun Shipbuilding and Dry Dock Company, where I had worked and got kicked out, So we went down there, and here was this brand new ship, just came off of the way. Tugs pushed it back up against the dock. Paint was still, you could smell paint on it. And so we went aboard, and 6 tugs grabbed hold of us, took us up the Delaware River, about 12 miles maybe, something like that, and docked us right close to where we were staying, right there on the docks. Well, then after that, there's nothing on this ship, nothing. When we took it up there to tie it up, they had to throw lines up to us that we could pull them up and tie the thing up on the dock. This was a brand new ship. Now, you see, because it was brand new, if you're assigned to a ship before it's commissioned, you're a plank owner. You ever hear that before?
No.
Yeah. In the old wooden, they came from the wooden, when they built wooden ships. It became like an owner of the plank on it, you see. So, so then, in about 2 days, these tractor trailers started showing up with all kinds of supplies on them, you know, and us 16 guys. Now, there's winches on these, but there's no cargo nets. There's nothing there. So we carried all the supplies for 2 or 3, 4 weeks onto this ship and put them in their place. And then on a certain day, it was late in December then. It's getting late in December. Now we're living out on the dock, you know. The night before it was commissioned, there was about 80 men were shipped in from somewhere else, see? And we were still working, and they grabbed up all the good lockers and all the good bunks. And the next day it was commissioned, and we were still carrying stuff on the ship. So Chief Petty Officer come down and he says, "Boys," he said, "if you get done in time, maybe you're going to make it up there in time to see it, hear it commissioned." So we did. We really hurried, and we got our sea bags, and we were running up the gangway when it was being commissioned. That's how close that was. But that still made us and the other 80 men all plank owners because we were assigned to it before it was in. Okay, now from there we got a captain. Now when we brought that ship up from the shipyards, you see, we couldn't put it under its own power because it didn't have a captain. You're not allowed to do that. So, but we got a captain. Captain Winkler was his name. And so then in a couple of days, we went down to Norfolk. Now, my goodness, we tied up down there, and the supplies down there. We didn't have any boats or anything. We didn't have anything at all. And so they really fixed us up. They put us in good shape. We got some more men down there. Now it was time for a shakedown cruise. So we go out to the Atlantic for about 10 days in a shakedown cruise to everybody learn, how things are running and learn about the ship and get it operating. And so then we had enough of men just about to get by with. Okay.
What's your role?
Pardon?
What role do you have on the ship?
Okay, I was just a seaman at that time. But then because I had so much experience from the shop, I became what they call a ship fitter. And I was a mechanics. I did a lot of mechanical work on pumps and all kinds of stuff. And as a matter of fact, at that very young age, I got an advancement up to a first-class seaman or something like that, and I was in charge of the shop. I was, because I had all this experience from being in the shop at home, and so then with the crew we had, we went to Aruba, and we loaded that ship up for the first time full of oil. We could put in other ships, Went through the canal. Went through the canal, went up to California, and got some more people, and went straight to Pacific, straight to Japan.
Wow.
Yep.
When did you get? Well, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back with much more on Veterans Chronicles. We're back on Veterans Chronicles. Our guest this week is Charles Temple. He is a veteran of World War II of the U.S. Navy, and in our first segment, he told us all about his joining of the Navy, a little bit younger than he said he was, and how the ship eventually got to Asia. So that's where we left off, is when you got to Japan. When did you get there in 1945? Was the war already over, or was it still going
War
on?
was over.
Okay.
Yeah. Didn't get there till 46.
46, okay.
Yeah, you see, 45 was over then, and it came January, that was January of 46.
Okay.
So it was March or April of 46.
Very good. And what was your role there? What was the job of the ship to do once it got to Japan?
Maintenance. Maintenance all over the ship, and I was in charge of the group that did all the pumping, taking care of all the pumps, selecting which tanks we would take fuel out of, you know, and worked with the seamen that were handling the pipes and the hoses. Yeah, so that was my job, and I oftentimes was on the phones talking to the other ship, but I had other people who were doing some of the other work.
What was the overall job of the ship? Why was your ship sent specifically to Japan?
We were a fuel ship that fueled other ships at sea. AO means auxiliary oiler, an oiler or a tanker. We hauled oil, and we traveled with the fleet, and we fueled destroyers, the DDs, the DEs, aircraft carriers, battleships, cruisers, anything that the fleet had, we had fuel for them, and we traveled with them all the time.
Explain the process. It seems simple just by talking about it, but explain what's involved in refueling another ship.
Okay. Here's what we always did. When we got up first thing in the morning, somebody would go out and say, "You see any ships out there?" "Yeah, there's 3 or 4 out there." Well, it wouldn't be very long, maybe till 8 or 9 o'clock. They'd be all lined up behind you, see? And then they would start coming up one at a time, you see. Now, what we did, we took a gun, and we had a lot of line on it, and shot a little metal thing over the ship, the other ship, and the seamen over there would pull that line, and then they would pull another line like a clothesline, and they'd pick another big line, which would pull a cable over. And they would attach this cable onto the other ship. And then on our ship, we had these huge big hoses that had big rollers and pulleys on them, which would roll on this cable, okay? And of course, they had already received the equipment they needed to pull it over, and they would pull it over and attach the fittings onto their ship, bolt them on, and then they would tell us they're ready, and we would start pumping them fuel. And we would pump until they're full, and then they would disconnect it, and we would pull that back. And they had big high pillars on the ship that all these big hoses and everything would be pulled up to them, and they would be stored there. Yeah.
How long of a process is that? I guess it depends on the size of the ship.
It depends on how much fuel they needed, and it depends on the size of the ship. I would say on a destroyer, 2 to 3 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, on an aircraft carrier, they'd hold more. You know, they might be 4 hours.
How many gallons is that?
Thousands, hundreds, sometimes in a carrier, 200,000 or 300,000. On a destroyer, it might be 20, 15,000, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Any mishaps along the way?
Pardon?
Any mishaps or fires or anything like that along the way?
No, not really serious. One of the things we had to be careful about is if we were in heavy seas. And between the two ships, there'd be a lot of chopping, of waves coming up and, you know, like that. And sometimes when we first sent the hoses over, they would be hanging down more, you know. Those big waves would catch them and be fierce pulling power, pressure on them. And I think I'm right in saying that we only ever lost hoses one time. But we did have several times where we fought it pretty hard to keep them in place.
You were also telling me during the last break that you were off the coast of China during the Chinese Civil War. Tell our listeners a little about that.
Well, okay. We were in Tsingtao, which is north. That's up almost as far as you can go until you get into Russia and Korea, okay? There was nothing very eventual up there, and by the way, they make Tsingtao beer up there. It's right. It's the factory is right on the wall, right on the water. So then, when it got too hot up there, you know, things just got. We shouldn't be there. We went down to Shanghai, and then we were in and out of Shanghai. We didn't stay there all the time. We were in and out. Well, things got hot down there, and it got to the point where we had to leave. We couldn't go ashore there and feel very safe anymore because there was too much influence from Mao Tse-tung, which is a communist group, you know.
Sure.
And they were making a big, and I was standing shore patrol over there with a permanent shore patrol chief in Shanghai and a Chinese army officer. Okay, we had to take turns, you know, going there, and this is the last time I was there. We were coming down the street onto the main street. I think it's called the Bund in there in Shanghai, and my goodness, there was Chinese as far as you could see. You couldn't see the end of them. They were demonstrating, okay, having a big demonstration, and Mao's people had these people really wound up. See, they were really excited about what's maybe going to happen if they get a new regime in power and all that sort of thing. And so this is one of our chief petty officers in the Navy was driving, and this army officer from the Nationalist Chinese Army was in the other seat, and I was in the back. Now, spread our legs like this, and we had our rifles and all that, and before we knew it, we were surrounded, and people just hollering and screaming, you know, and whambo, right up alongside of my head, I got hit with a rock, and knocked me out down in the Jeep. I don't know how long I was down there, but when I came to, I was ready to shoot. The chief grabbed my gun and he said, "Charles," he said, "we can't kill all these Chinamen." He said, "We got to get out of here." so I'm bleeding, you know, on my head, and we didn't know it, but there was like a divider in the middle of the street, you know.
Tip your hat back just a little bit.
Okay, okay. There was a divider in the middle of the street, and lo and behold, we hit this damn divider, and the Jeep jumped up in the air and went over on the right side, and the chief was hollering, "Charlie, lean, lean." We come within a fraction of upsetting that thing. Finally, I went boom back down, you know, and we got out, and now we were up in Shanghai. Now we were tied up in the I think it's the Yangtze River. Okay, now we were down far enough that there was tide water came up there. See, that the tide, you're down far enough that the tide was there, so we couldn't tie up on one buoy because we had to swing, and there wasn't enough room for us to swing, so we had to tie up fore and aft. Okay, so we got back. And got back to the ship, and this was in the afternoon, pretty late then, and I wasn't involved in any meetings or anything after that. But the next morning, the word came down, we're leaving here, and so we swung around. So we spun around by backing her up and pulling around. And we went out to Yangtze, and I was never back. We weren't allowed to go back anymore. Now, that's shortly after that, Chiang Kai-shek went to Formosa. Okay, very shortly after that, and that's when Mao took over.
Wow.
And So, but we still stayed in the Pacific. I didn't go home then. We still stayed with the fleet, and we still were all over the place, you know, as a show of force.
Where were some of the places you went?
About every island out there you could be. Oh, Wake, Pearl Harbor, Japan, Philippines, Singapore, God, other islands I even forget. Oh, I was on an atom bomb test too. At Anahuac, Anahuac Island, there's two islands out there, Anahuac and another one.
What was that like to be part of that test?
Well, really, we were there to help the fleet. And we were back, we were about as close as the rest of the fleet. And when they got ready to put this thing off, I saw two bombs go off. They gave us little cardboard things like, you know, for glasses. Now here's what happens when an atom bomb goes off. You see the thing go boom, big, you know, boom. Now, maybe it's 30 seconds, maybe it's 45 seconds. There's a heck of a wind blows. It blows the air out, see. It makes a lot of air pressure, blows just like a windstorm. And then in another 2 or 3 minutes, it goes the other way. It comes back in. So we were there with the fleet, but we were there also observed and saw the atom bomb test.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, another thing that we did, and if this was getting near end of my time in the service, I think it might have been in 47 maybe, we went across the equator down to New Zealand and Australia. And there you see you get your initiation. When you cross the equator, and it becomes a permanent part of your naval record. And it is a mean initiation. It is mean. I mean, they put stuff in you, make you choke to death. They built a tank out of canvas and it had about 3-4 feet of water in there. Now, if you never went across the equator, you are there's two names for it. Anyway, they get you in this tank, two men, and they keep dunking you. Shellback or pollywog, that's it. Pollywog is what you are before you go across. And you're supposed to say I'm a shellback, but they're keeping you in the water so much you can't say anything. You almost drown, you know. And finally you say, shellback, you know. And so then they throw you out on the deck. I mean, literally throw you out on the deck. Well, we had a long catwalk about as long as this room here, from one deck area to another. And you know these things they have behind the airplanes, they pull those big red things for target practice. You ever see them?
Sure.
Well, they had one of those and they had it tied up on the railings. 2 weeks to save the garbage. And they put that thing full of garbage and you had to crawl through that. Now, first of all, you go before the judge and they got bean bags and they're beating on you. They want to know if you're guilty or you're not guilty. And of course, you want to say I'm guilty and get on with this thing. So then they send you on through, and you get around to where this thing is, where you got to crawl through it, and it's got garbage, terrible, hard, nasty garbage in it. And there's men on both sides with bean bags and slaps beating you on the back and the behind, beating on you. And then when you get up to the other end, there's a man up with a fire hose, shooting you with a fire hose. Okay? And when you come out of there, you're just about shot. But you're done. You've got your initiation for becoming a shellback. You never heard of a shellback before?
I hadn't heard that term before.
Every ship has that. That's standard on every ship.
So did you ever become one of the inflictors later on?
No, I never was a part of making somebody else know. I never was, because I was never on another ship.
Ah.
I stayed on that same ship. And then we were down to New Zealand and Australia, and And then came from there back up into Singapore and was up there. So,
How long overall were you over there?
I think I was over there nearly 3.5 years.
Wow.
Yeah,
All in one stretch?
yeah. See, should have been in 4 years. And, we came back. What happened here is we came back to Long Beach, California, because we needed some repairs done. And we went into what they call a dry dock. You know what a dry dock is?
Yes, sir.
Because they had to work on something underneath. And so we got ready to leave there, and I only had like 4 months or something like that to go. The captain went over the list, and he got the chief petty officer to come to me and says, "Charles, we're going out for 8 months, and where we're going, you're having one heck of a time ever getting back home." He said, "You're going over to Treasure Island." So I went over there for a couple of months, and then they separated me, and I went home.
Wow. What do you think about most when you think about your service? Which experience or people or leaders do you think of when you think about your time in the service that had the greatest impact on you?
Okay, when it comes to my superiors, I didn't have any superiors that I couldn't just give an A+ to. Very, very good. Captain Winkler was a good captain. And because I had so much experience as a young man, I was in charge of the shop. I went up in my ranking fast. I really did. Before I left the ship, I was a second-class petty officer, and the chief had told me on the next trip out, he said, "You're going to be first class." Well, as it turned out, I didn't go on that last trip. Okay. Now, after I would have begun first class, and now this was in 3.5 years. The next step for me would have been a chief petty officer. The average years that it takes a chief petty officer that I read about on the internet to become a chief petty officer is 17 years.
Wow.
Now, how long it would have been taking me to go from first class to chief petty, I don't know, but I was fortunate as a young man to get great training. I was fortunate every place I ever went and did. I was treated well. I was advanced well. I had good experiences. I worked hard. I did my job. And I can't say anything about my service except it's one of the best things that ever happened to me in my life.
Can't argue.
One of the best things that ever happened to me in my life. I had a tremendous tour of duty, and I'm happy that I went in. I'm happy that I advanced the way I did, and there was a girl near Philadelphia that I got interested in, and I just thought I had to come home.
You're a veteran of the U.S. Navy and World War II. I'm Greg Columbus. This is Veterans Chronicles.